It's been a while, I think, since I did a lot of stuff about a response to comments. So I'm going to do a response to a comment today now. This is Ian Bird, who says, Boris is a bumbling fool. Oh, let's stain the sofa. Both in his private and work life, he wasted an 80-seat majority, defended his corrupt mates via Parliament, and added 1.5 trillion to the national debt. He should be in jail for fraud and corruption. Well, maybe he should, but I think it's something that we need to examine in layers, like a cake. Well, I've never had any cake. Well, first, why Boris can be called a bumbling fool. Second, the concept of the fool, and third, the concept of the fool in literature, from court jesters to Kendod and Shakespeare's Yorick. Those two, of course, if you've seen the Kenneth Branagh film, you will know that they collide. And finally, I think why fools should still be heard and why Boris's words might carry weight despite the chaos that he carries. Boris Johnson has cultivated, some people would probably even say weaponized, the reputation for being shambolic, for shambolic affability. I like to think that he got his hairstyle from me, but the evidence for describing him as a bumbling fool includes the clowning with oratory, his tangled metaphors, his misremembered classical references, his deliberate verbal slapstick. Again, I like to think I've been an influence. His speeches are littered with errors that appear endearing but distract from the content, and I think that is partly deliberate. I don't think it's wholly deliberate. I think once you start doing it, it becomes a habit. I know. And I find myself forgetting things that I know, but somehow when I start talking, I forget relevant details, and what comes out is something slightly odd. And you think, oh, is that intentional? It started out as intentional. It's become routine, and it's become impulsive, rather like, is Hamlet playing the fool, or is he the fool? Is he mad or seemingly mad? As Prime Minister, Boris repeatedly avoided detail. Civil servants found his attention span short, and his ministerial colleagues accused him of avoiding hard choices. And I don't think there's any explanation or excuse for that. His personal life, his affairs, his unexplained financial arrangements, the funding of his flat renovation, the sense that his personal loyalty trumped rules, all of that I think is shameful and abhorrent. The Partygate, the clearest example of the fool undermining serious office, in Johnson's Downing Street, the illegal gatherings while the nation was in lockdown were detestable. But as Therese Kofi has pointed out, the civil service believes it is a rule to itself and that it can break rules. And I think her evidence yesterday is really important in shining a light on Boris Johnson's fumblings. Johnson wasn't big enough or strong enough to put the civil service in its place, and the civil service has clearly got out of control. I don't think it's about people being at their desk. It's about people not having a sense of what is right or wrong. It's about people being locked into paperwork where statistics matter more than morality, ethics, and people. And his inconsistency is something I understand, and I appreciate that. His Brexit rhetoric about cake and eating it, his Northern Ireland protocol contradictions, his late pandemic U-turns, all of that I understand, because Boris Johnson isn't good in a crisis and hadn't set anything up to deal with a crisis. He is the crisis. His way of approaching life was to create crisis in order to deflect from the order that exists. So he brings us. So when real crisis occurred, he couldn't manage it. And actually, it's the same process with Trump. Trump does the same thing. Why do I know? Because there was a time when I tried this, and it works for a short period. It doesn't work in the long run. In the long run, there is nothing that is more important than schedules and order. And I have so many lists of things that I have to do right down to the minute. And I think Boris has never grown up out of the sort of undergraduate chaos. You bring chaos to your tutorial, and that is what rules the hour. You can't bring that to a serious job. You can't bring that to a serious life. And that was Boris's foolishness. And that calculated unseriousness, his famous zip wire stunt, for example, or the rugby tackling children in photo ops, fed an image of a mischievous scamp, and that distracts from policy failures. Yes, the buffoonery was a tool, and I'm the first to notice that, and I'm the first to observe that and to identify that, because I understand it, because I do it, or I have done it. And certainly playing panto and being the old man in pantomime, it's an opportunity to go back to exactly that fooling around. It's a character I understand. It's a character I played when I was younger, and I played it to aplomb, I think, and it became natural. And it's taken many years to pull myself away from that character, so I understand Boris. And I don't like that character. I think it's fake. It builds rapport with sections of the public. It makes him appear human in a way many find refreshingly anto-technocratic. He is no fool. Believe me, he is no fool. But he appears to be one. And maybe some of that has seeped into his actual consciousness, but the fool is a game that he believes. Now, the Russian holy fool, Euro DV, in Russian tradition, the holy fool, this tradition is essentially to understand why calling somebody a fool is not always an insult. The Russian term is Euro DV, I think. And the concept appears in Byzantium, but it flourished in Russia, particularly from the 14th century onwards. The holy fool feigns madness or social deviance for spiritual purposes. It picks up the whole idea of the fellow who lived in the barrel, forget his name now, and challenging hypocrisy, challenging wealth, challenging cruelty. And often these people were beggars, they were dirty, they were loud, they insulted the nobles or the clergy, but they were seen as possessing divine insight. And they rejected comfort. They clung to asceticism, often naked in the snow. That was seen as a holy madness. They were believed to see hidden truths or the future. They were blessed with prophecy, and they shamed the powerful through mockery, cryptic riddles, shocking acts, like the fellow from Sinop. What's his name now? Anyway, by behaving insanely, they exposed society's normal sins, and there are three, I think, who are worth talking about, other than Saint Seraphim of Sarosh, the fellow who had bears, but I think particularly Vasily Blageny, Basil the Blessed, so revered that Ivan the Terrible built St. Basil's Cathedral in his honor. He confronted Ivan for his cruelty, terrifying the Tsar. Xenia of St. Petersburg, after her husband's death, she gave away everything, and she wandered homeless in rags, helping the poor and praying for the city. She reminds me very much of the mother of Prince Philip. John of Kronstadt, though more clerical, he displayed traits of prophetic outspokenness and spiritual confrontation. Dostoevsky's novels feature Eurodivi-like characters, Prince Mishkin in The Idiot, a Christ-like figure whose innocence and honesty disrupt society. Tolstoy admired the holy fool's defiance of wealth and hypocrisy. Even Soviet literature employs the figure obliquely to criticize the system. In more Western tradition, the fool in history and literature has a long pedigree that predates the Russian traditions. The court jesters licensed to speak truth to power. Jesters could mock the monarch when no one else dared. They used wit, parody, and games and their coxcomb to make dangerous criticisms safe. Monarchs often valued them as a kind of safety valve or as a conscience. Fools and clowns were vital truth-tellers. Lear's fool reminds Lear of his folly in dividing the kingdom with biting jokes, touchstone in As You Like It. The witty critic of romantic and courtly pretensions, and somebody who has insight and can draw conclusions. Yorick in Hamlet, though dead, we don't see him except in the Branagh film when he's played by Kendod. His skull embodies the levelling truth of morality. Alas, poor Yorick. It confronts the vanity of life. Kendod, I mentioned him. Kendod was a modern British example of the trickster clown. He combined absurdist humour. I adore Kendod. And I was so happy to go up to Liverpool about 2 years ago and see the mural of him. Just wonderful man, and I adored his performances, which overran, of course, on the good old days, and in the Royal Command performances and so on. His absurdist humour, with the shrewd commentary on British life and the political humour as well. His inheritance from Yorick lies in the joke as the moral leveller, mocking pretension, revealing uncomfortable truths while making us laugh. And that brings me back to Boris Johnson, because even the fool's words demand attention. Out of the mouths of babes, the biblical and proverbial, out of the mouths of babes and fools, the biblical and proverbial wisdom suggests simple or unguarded speech can reveal hidden truths. The holy fool chooses to appear foolish to break the spell of power and self-deception. The court jester's mockery was crucial to balance royal vanity, and even Boris Johnson, with all his clowning, can accidentally speak truth that others will not say. The same thing with Nadine Dorries, with anybody with a platform. Simply because you don't like somebody, or because you think they're ridiculous, or because you think they're foolish, doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to them. Boris's unguarded admissions about Brexit complexes, his ability to articulate, if clumsily, a popular mood ignored by technocrats, his flamboyance shaking up a stale political class, the fact that he was regarded as an outsider by the political class gave him a power that few possess. The fact that he is considered an outsider by the majority of the public gives him a power and an insight that we dismiss at our peril. So while he may be careless, hypocritical, self-serving, his words carry uncomfortable insight about national identity, about political legitimacy, about the limits of rule-bound government. And calling Johnson a bumbling fool is justified by his own behaviour, of course it is, but to dismiss him for being a bumbling fool misses something important. The fool has an ancient, even sacred cultural authority, going all the way back to the Bacchae, where Dionysus appears in the court of King Pentheus as a fool. Holy fools in Russia use madness to criticize power and expose moral failings. Literary fools are indispensable truth-tellers who make us laugh and squirm in equal measure. And even modern comedians inherit this role of gently or sharply unmasking hypocrisy. So when Boris speaks, we may groan at the act, but we should listen carefully, because fools often have the last word.